Are we good? Can you guys see? Okay, awesome. Okay, great. So all of you, so my name's Kelly. This is not by any means like a super advanced pivot table class, but it's a little bit more than just a beginner. So we are going to go through it, and if you can open up the invite, there are sample data files in the invite that we're going to work through. One of the things we got feedback about of our last class was we wanted it to be more interactive. How come I have no audio? Okay, are you working through like I don't know what to do. Somebody's saying I have no audio.
It's probably not.
Okay. Okay. Also, why can't they see my screen? Sorry, I am not technologically advanced. I thought I was already presenting.
You are presenting. I think it's someone else's. I think just
okay,
other
so we're going to work through the sample data. Is it?
Oh, you know why? Because you are on you want to mirror it, right?
When did you send that?
It's in the invite. So if you could just open up the invite, it'll just be at the bottom of the invite. Yay, okay, great. Can everybody see my screen now? Great, that's wonderful news. It's kind of weird, but it's good. So let me know if anybody's having trouble. If you open up the invite, it should just be down here at the bottom. We're gonna work through sample data 1 first. So if you could just open that. So what I pulled is just some random data example. I just went into Alex and pulled a report of some time period of online sales. So obviously this would have to be, this would work for whatever you need it for, but this was just some sample data. If you need help with Alex, that could be a separate class or question, but this was just some random data. So any data that you might have, this would be how you would manipulate it in a pivot table. So why we use pivot tables? They're incredibly powerful and flexible. They're easy and quick. And then one interesting thing is you can copy and paste pivot tables to another workbook without including like the data source, which helps in presentations. So it doesn't need the data attached to it. It has it in a pivot cache. So it's very easy to use them in presentations and decks and in whatever you might need it for. Without having to provide the data source. So let me know, is everybody in the room with us you have the data open? We're all good?
Somebody else sent us.
Oh, so do you need it?
I don't know, can we use any Excel
data? She can just email it to you real quick, I think. You don't have it either? Sorry. Okay, so I'm just going to start and then we can pause so you guys can catch up. So one thing about pivot tables, so the first thing we're going to talk about, this is kind of my syllabus, is we're going to create a pivot table. So you can't have subtotals in your data. So if you have a bunch of subtotals in there, you would want to get rid of them. We don't have any subtotals in here. So we don't have that problem, but I've seen that happen to people where it'll mess up your data because you have subtotals. You can't have any blank rows or columns. So if you have those, just delete those out of your data source. And then this is the main thing. All columns must have a column header, and it should be unique. So if you look right here on my data, they don't all have column headers right now, right? And unfortunately, when you download something from Alex, it doesn't always have a column header. So that's something that we have to add in here. So what you want to do is just add in a column header. I should enable editing. So we're going to just name them however you feel fit, and something that you would recognize. It also can't they have to be unique, so it can't be the same name of something else. So if you just go through, so for example, I'm naming this, so this was Sears division, I'm going to name this one div name. So these are the divisions, this is the name. And then all your metrics typically have column headers to begin with. Is everybody with me? Okay, so now that all of our columns have headings, that's when we can make our pivot table. So what you're going to want to do is select all of the data. You can do that in many ways. You can just select it with your mouse. You can select it by column shifting and grabbing it. But either way, you just need to include all of the data that you want in your pivot table and have it highlighted. And then you're going to go to Insert. And then, I don't know why my screen's so little, but there's no pivot tables. Maybe it's under here. Oh, there we go. Okay. We're just gonna, so you can add it into the existing worksheet. For the most part, I always just make it in a new worksheet. But those would be the two differences. So since you have your column or your data already highlighted, it's already going to default to that data. But if you had named that data range, you could type in the data name. There's lots of different ways you can add the data, but this is the easiest. You just highlight it and then insert pivot table. Okay, so now we have a new sheet and we have our pivot table ready to create. Is everybody with me on the same page? We're good? Okay. So what's really cool about pivot tables is, like I said, there's so many different things you can do with it. We just had a normal sales data pull. So what I want to look at, so this is what your pivot table thing looks like. There's filters, columns, values, and rows. So where you drag and drop your fields into those builders is how your pivot table will create. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to drag down business down into rows, and it's going to give us a list of all of our unique businesses. So these are specific to, they're unique, so they dedupe anything. But even if they were in there lots of times, it would dedupe them. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to add a value. So adding a value so you want to typically add a metric to the values. Or if you wanted to, so say I wanted to know how many divisions are in each of these businesses. You could do that as well. So let's do that first. That's kind of an easier thing. So right now I have business and then all of the divisions that are under each of those businesses. Well, what if I just wanted to know that footwear had 4 and fine jewelry only had 1? So instead of doing it under rows, we're going to move it to values. And then instead of sum, we're going to add it to count. We're going to change it to count. So there's 4 divisions under accessories. I'm going too fast? Okay, sorry. Okay, so we were all okay here, right? We dragged businesses down to rows. Are we all good there? Okay. So say the first thing I wanted to do is count how many divisions are under each business. You're going to drag whatever you want to count into values, and then you're going to change the value. So you're going to click on it and change the value field setting to sum, or I'm sorry, to count. So now it's going to count how many divisions are under each business. So this would be useful if you were looking at how many items are in a category. However, how many, or if your data is looking at, like, if your category is socks, how many items of socks you sold. You wanted to see how many different socks you sold. Sorry, most of my examples will probably be apparel because I'm apparel based. But so are we all cool here? Okay, so that's count. The more often thing that you would probably want to look at is a sum of a metric. So for example, I look at sales most of the time. So we're going to drag our sales down into values. Okay, so that's great. It's giving us now all of our businesses and then all the sum of our total sales. So it's beautiful. It's very easy, and it's easily presented. We're also going to add the sum of sales last year to our values. It's kind of hard because my screen's so little. Is there like a way to make it?
That's just because you're presenting this.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you can't really
Okay, but everybody's on the same page. So you can just, you drag your metrics down under the values, and it'll create the pivot table. Okay, so now I know that accessories did this amount of sales this year and this amount of sales last year. Well, maybe I also want to know how many or what the divisions underneath accessories did. So now I also want to add div name to my rows. So it'll just calculate the exact metrics it'll add the metrics to those things. So now I know that all these divs under accessories did this amount of sales this year and this amount of sales last year. Is everybody with me?
Can you show adding column C again? Somebody's on Skype is asking. So adding that second metric and making the.
Sure. So now we don't have. So all I wanted to do was add last year's sales. So I went and found it in my pivot table fields and dragged it down to values, and it added it right after it. And how they're ordered in this field is how they show up. So say I wanted last year's first for some reason, I can change it. So however you drag and drop it, it'll add that in there.
And here's another Skype question, so let me just address it really quick. So somebody's asking, can you identify the best ways to understand what goes into filters, column labels, row labels, and values? And really, the great thing about a pivot table is that it allows you lots of different ways to look at your data. So there really isn't too much of a right or wrong answer on what goes where. In general, for the values, you want to put some sort of metric in there because most of the time you're looking at how something is rolling up. As Kelly is showing us sales and how they roll up by division and by business. But also how she showed you when she dropped in the division numbers, which are not really a metric, they're just what the division is. She got how many different divisions are under that business. So there's really a lot of different ways to make the table your own depending on what data you want to do. So you can really, it's really up to your imagination on what works best for you.
Yeah. Usually I start with rows and I start with what I want to look at and then I add in my values. So that would be the best way I do it. But speaking of filters, a good thing to look at is how we use filters. So a filter is a little different. It doesn't just show you all of the data. You can filter to specific data that you would want to. So in this example, I'm going to move business from down here where it was in rows and move it up to filters. So it's removed it from my pivot table here, but I have it up here in my business. So I can filter. So now say I want to look at just home fashions. So I'm going to select home fashions and it's going to filter to just my home division, my home fashion divisions. You can filter it to just automotive divisions. You can filter it to, so that would be the best use for filters. So in our case, for the most part, I want to just see it all. So I'm just going to leave it down here in rows so it's visible the whole time and I don't want to filter to it. Filters are useful if maybe you wanted to share it with somebody and they only needed to see one part of it. So say you wanted to share it with your business partner or your buyer and they only care about socks. They can filter to just socks so that they are only seeing the data that's relevant to them. Okay. So the next thing that I'm going to do is teach you, it's called a calculated field. So now I have this year's sales and last year's sales. So what I want to do next is look at how sales did versus last year, but I don't necessarily have that in my data table already, so I'm going to insert a calculated field. So there's two places you could insert a field. If you're under the Home tab in Excel, you can click on Insert and insert calculated field. If you're on your pivot table field, usually it's like over here and it says insert a field. No. Calculations here, field, items, and sets, and then you insert a calculated field. So there's two different ways to do it. They'll give you the same result. So once you want to insert a calculated field, it gives you this pop-up, and and this is where you can actually calculate a field based on the data that wasn't already in the data. So say you want to see sales dollars versus last year. So you want to see what your sales this year, and you're going to just double click on that field, sales this year, and then minus sales last year. Is everybody with me? And then you're going to click OK, and it's going to give you your sales this year minus your sales last year. And it's going to do all the calculation for you. There's nothing you have to do. And then it'll be manipulated however you want to do it now. It's a field that will always be in there. Say I want to see also, you can make a calculated field with a calculated field. Sorry if that is complicated, but I'll show you. So say now I have my dollars versus last year. Maybe I also want to see what our percentage was versus last year. So you're going to do the same thing again. You're going to insert a calculated field. You're going to take your new field, which was your sales dollars versus last year. I mean, this is just math. You could do any math you wanted, but this is just an example. And then I'm going to divide that by my sales of last year, and that's going to give me the percentage of versus last year. Okay, but look, it's not formatted how I wanted it, right? So what we're going to do is you're going to right-click on a field, and you go to Value Field Settings. And you can name it in here. You could name it when you were calculating the field, but you could also name it here. So we're going to name it sales percentage versus last year. And then we're going to go to number format. You're not going to change the value field by. We're going to just go to number format, which sometimes it takes like a second to pop up. And then we're going to switch it to percentage with no decimal places. And then you're going to just hit OK, and it'll make it percentages. So now we know. Yeah, of course. So I'm just going to undo. So we're here, right? Okay. Yeah, so we're going to right-click on it, and you're going to... Oh, okay. So one more time, we'll go back. No, it's okay. I'm trying to just go. Okay, so we'll just add it again. So we're going to go to Insert Calculated Field. And then in here, I mean, you could do it one of two ways. You could take this year's sales minus last year's sales and divide by last year's sales. Or since we had already calculated that other metric, which was sales dollars versus last year, we're going to just take that. We're going to take sales dollars versus last year divided by sales last year. So whatever your equation that you want to look at, you just put it in here. And then you could name it in here too. So we'll put sales percentage versus last year. And then you're going to hit OK, and then it gives us our percentage. And we're going to change it to percentages by going to Value Field Settings, Number Format, and then hit Percentage. And now it's percentages. I'm just going to remove this one. Okay, so is everybody with me? So now we have our rows here, which were our businesses and divisions. We have our sales. We have our sales last year. We have our sales minus last year, so how we did versus last year, and then also our percentages versus last year. And it's all in a beautiful format. So we talked about counting things. We talked about values. We talked about calculated fields. Okay, so another example would be, say you wanted to come up with your margin rate for each of these areas. So it would be the same thing. You would insert a calculated field. You would take your margin dollar this year divided by your sales this year, and it's going to give you your margin rate. And unfortunately, you have to filter or change it to be a percentage. And now we have a percentage. Any questions about that? So that's a calculated field. There's a lot of different things you could calculate. The next thing I'm going to show you is how you can sort. So this has our rows in alphabetical order right now. So this is all of our businesses in alphabetical order, which doesn't mean much to me. I want to see it based on who sold the most last, whatever time period this is. So what you do is you right-click in one of the values, you go to sort, and then you select sort largest to smallest, or smallest to largest, or however you might want to sort it. So now it's sorting it's sorting the big, like the top level by sales. So obviously home appliances did the most amount of sales. Was anybody surprised by that? No. Okay. And then it's going to go down by sales. Does that make sense? Okay. So that's sorting. Another thing you might want to do is look at the percentage of sales of the total, right? So for example, I want to know how much of my total sales were home appliances, or I want to know how much of my total pants were these specific jeans. So what you could do is you could right click in here and then show values as, and you could do percentage of column total. That's the one I use the most often. Or you could, so percentage of the column total would be, so these were all of our sales that day and made it to 100%, and then it's broken down by each division and business. Another way you might want to look at it is if you want to see your values as a percentage of the parent row. I use this one quite often as well. So it'll give me the percentage of that home, like business is to the total business, and then it breaks down each division under business as a percentage to that total. So it's giving you the percentage of the parent. Does that make sense? Everybody still with me? Okay, cool. One thing that's cool about pivot tables is you could add the same field twice. So say I wanted to see the sales and what the percentages are. So you just simply drag your field down to the values again and add a duplicate field of the same field. And so now I'm looking at, I can see my sales, and then I can also see what the percentage of the total is. So that's kind of handy too if you needed to display it that way. One thing that kind of frustrates me sometimes is if my data isn't like grouped correctly. So one thing that we can do, and I'm going to unsort this because I don't want it sorted. So say I wanted to look at all of this just by soft lines versus hard lines, but that wasn't one of our data feeds in the first place. So you can group things manually. So I'm going to use the example of apparel. There are 4 or 5 divisions that make up apparel, and I want to just look at those, or I want those all to be grouped together because I want to look at apparel all at once instead of having to look down to find women's, find men's, find kids. So what you can do is you can group manually. So what you're going to do is control click on each of the things you want to include in there. So you're going to hit accessories, children, you can hit whatever you want to group. This is just an example. Intimates is apparel, men's is apparel, and then ready to wear is apparel. So now I have all the ones I want highlighted, and I did that by control clicking them. Be careful to hold control when you're scrolling. Sometimes you have to let go of the control for a second. But just control click to have them all selected, and then you're going to right click and you're going to click group. So now it's grouping all of those. So look, I have a group 1 of all of my apparel businesses. So this would be, we could do the same thing for home. There's home fashions, and then there's household goods. Well, we know both of those fall under the home view. So we could group those as well. So we're going to just highlight those. And we're going to group. So now group 2 is home, all of our home businesses. Does that make sense? Can you guys see how that would be useful? I can. Also, sometimes if you group things and then you want to look at them, you can move that grouping that you just made into your filters, and then you could filter to just what you want to look at. So I want to look at just apparel, so I can filter to just apparel. One way that you can change the name of the grouping, so they don't have to be group 1 or group 2. You can just type them in there and it'll change it. So now we have a grouping of apparel that has all of our apparel businesses in there and the apparel divisions, and then we have home as well. Is everybody with me still? Okay. So that is most of the different calculations. So say this is exactly what I wanted to present to my business partners. I wanted to add this to a deck. I wanted to add this to my business recap. We kind of want to clean up how it looks, right? So we're going to format some things. So one way to format the columns into how you want it to look would be into value fields. So you right click on the field that you're trying to adjust. You're going to go to value field settings. I'm going to change the name of this. I just want it to be sales dollar this year. So you can change the name of it in the custom name. And then you could also change how it looks, so the number format. So this could be our percentages, this could be our dates, this could be our times our currency. Most of the time I use currency but whatever you're looking at, it's very easy to format how you want to look at it. So like, look at how much prettier that is now than it was with the decimals and the no dollar signs. So we're going to do the same thing here. So this was sales dollar last year, and exactly the same thing. Let me know if I'm going too fast. Too fast, okay. So I'll do it one more time, slow. It's just the same thing. So you right click on whatever field you want to format. You go down to value field settings, and then you can name it. So variance of dollar. So that's our variance dollar-wise versus last year. I mean, you can name it whatever you want, but that's our variance. That's what I'm going to name it, and then I'm going to change it to current. So that changes the name, and then in order to change like how it's formatted, you go to number format, and then you click whatever you want. Currency is the one I use the most. Sometimes I use number, and you could add a column, or you could add a comma, and this will show you how it's going to look. But for this case, we're going to use currency. Okay, so now we have all of our columns looking beautiful. I'm going to remove this one because I don't remember what it was. So we have our sales this year, our sales last year, our variance of sales versus last year, and then our sum of, or we're going to rename this one. So this is our variance percentage versus last year. Okay, so maybe I also don't want to just give them all of this data at once. So one thing that I use quite often is I click into this, I click into one, and then I go to analyze. And of course, they're like weird. Why is it so small?
It's all just truncated.
Yeah, but so what? How do I collapse? Oh, here. So under active field, which mine just shows me when my screen's wide, you could expand or collapse a field. So I'm just going to collapse, and look, it's going to collapse all of my groupings down. And then I could expand one at a time, or I can go back to active field and then expand field, and it'll expand them all. So that's a really nice way to just kind of summarize what you're looking at instead of showing it every little detail, but it's all still there. So if they were really interested in footwear, they could see what happened with footwear.
So where did you see that? What does active field come from?
So it's under the pivot table analyze button, and then it's under active field. When you're on a big screen, it's usually just like right out there. It's not like hidden, but if it is hidden, it's under active field. So expand and then collapse. It's a beautiful way to show the data how you want to. So that's expanding conditional formatting. So one thing I do almost every week is I want to look at what did best last week, right? So one way I'm going to do that is I'm going to get rid of business for right now. So these are just all of our divisions last whatever time period this is. So I use conditional formatting all the time. So there's a couple of different ways you can do that. So what you want to do is highlight the data. You want, for this case scenario, wanting to see what did best last year, you don't want to include the total because obviously the total is more than anything else in the data. So you're going to highlight it. You're going to go make sure you're on home, the home button in Excel, and you're going to go to conditional formatting. I use color scales all the time. I use just this like first one. It's the opposite if you do the So I just use this first one because green usually means good. So now this is giving us a very easy way to identify what we need to either what's doing really well. So cooking and cleanup, doing awesome. Maybe whatever automotive services didn't do great. So it's really easy to identify what your top performers were or your worst performers are by using conditional formatting. Another conditional formatting that I use all the time is it's called highlighting cell rules. So say I want to just I only want to look at things that did 50% or worse to last year. So if it did better to last year, I don't care. Actually, I'll just make it more simple. I only want to look at things that did worse than last year. So what I'm going to do is highlight the variance percentage to last year, and I'm going to go to conditional formatting, highlight cell rules, and I want to do anything less than 0. So if it did any worse than 0, I want it to fill with light red and dark red text. So now these are my which it's kind of a lot of them, but so these are all of the areas that did worse versus last year. And obviously you could do the alternate. So let's pretend we want to look at only the things that did better to last year. We're going to do anything greater than. So see how I just picked greater than, anything greater than 0, let's highlight it green. So now all of my green, any business or division that did better than last year is highlighted in green. So it's really easy to view that and filter and identify what you might need to work on or what might be performing really well. Another way you can format your template, so this is kind of just the default template, but there's all these built-in templates for pivot tables that make it look sharp. So one thing you can do is you can go to design in your pivot table field. Yeah, it's kind of hidden up there, but it's under design. And then these are all of our different pivot table design templates. So there's lots of different ones you could pick from. It doesn't undo your conditional formatting, but it'll just change everything else in there. So that's my very green one. I'm going to add back in businesses for a second. One thing that's kind of cool is that you can filter different levels of your report rows in different colors. So now, for example, this one, it's highlighting all of my businesses in a specific color, and then all of my divisions in a different color. So it's really clear to see what is what. Any questions? One thing that you can do, and James might have to help me out here because he taught me this recently. So sometimes my pivot table doesn't look like I want it to look. So say, for example, I wanted to see all of the divisions for each business, and I also wanted to see, hold on, I'm going to just expand this real quick. I also want to see what div number they are. So if I also want to know what div number so I want to know what div number hosiery is. So you can add Sears division down here. unmute. Okay, are you back with me? Let me know if there's, can you let me know if there's a question?
We can hear you. We can't
We
see
can
you.
hear you. Yeah.
Okay, they can hear me and they can see me again. Okay, cool. So all we did, I think, is, so I was talking about how, so looking at this is not a very pretty way to look at it, right? So I have my business and then I have my div name and then my div number. Well, I don't necessarily want to look at it like that. I want to look at it horizontally. So I'm going to go to show in tabular form, and it's going to bring, how do you explain it? You just it reformats it to be horizontal instead.
Yeah, so the compact form, if you notice, go back to compact form again really quick. So in compact form, every time that you add something in the rows area, you'll see that it all stays in column A, and it kind of just does this indentation for you. So that right now you have accessories, and then you have under that cosmetics, and then under that you have 74, but it's all in the one column. So that's the compact view. When you change it to tabular, it will put it in different columns, and so it'll look a little bit more like a spreadsheet. But you're also, because you're using a pivot table, you're still rolling up the data. So you can still see it at the same levels that you want to see it at. So put it back to tabular. And if you want to see it, again, more in a spreadsheet view, that's where you would also go to that report layout and do that repeat all item layout.
Yeah. So I was getting there. So then, okay. So it was showing my subtotals, but I don't really want to see them because I don't need to see a subtotal. But now it has my business and my div names and then the div number for each of those. So it's beautiful. If I had put the div number, or if I put the div number in my values, it would have counted them or manipulated them in some way. But I don't necessarily want to count them. I just want to see what they are, or I don't want to sum them up. So, but also maybe I want to see, I don't know how to explain this. You can repeat all item labels and it'll give you the data for each one of those. So do you guys have any questions on why this would be useful?
I'll give you an example of why I use it this way. Is if you have a bunch of data, and say you have it at, I don't know, item store level, it's crazy detail, but you only want it at the business level, division level. You don't care about seeing all the items in all of the locations. By doing it this way, you can still get a spreadsheet view where you see the business, the div name, the division, but everything would roll up. You wouldn't have duplicates for all the different locations and stuff, as opposed to looking at it just the data itself, right? That's why you would still use it as a pivot table.
Okay, so that's tabular view. We're going to go back to compact form, and we're going to get rid of our division. So to get rid of something in one of your fields is you could just drag it out, and then it'll go away. We're going to put back in one of our metrics because it looks empty without the metric. Okay, so that's tabular. Okay, the last thing I was going to show you about formatting is a slicer. So slicers look really great especially the filter. It's almost like filters, but if you need somebody to easily be able to filter to what they need. So for example, here I'm going to get rid of business again. So these are all of my divisions. I'm going to insert a slicer, and I'm going to do it by business. And I'm going to hit OK. So now here, this is what my slicer is. This is a slicer. And now you could easily click on whatever you might want. So I want to click on just fine jewelry. That's going to just show me fine jewelry. So we can clear that. Or say I want to click on all of home. So we could do home fashions, household goods, I don't know, all of the home. But these are now all of my home divisions. So this is good if you're giving it to an audience that might only care about a certain amount of things, like they only care about ready-to-wear. Well, these are the ready-wear divisions. And that's what a slicer is called. And you just, back to how you get that, we can just remove it. Under the Analyze tab in Pivot Table, you just insert a slicer. And you can insert it by any field that you might want to. So any questions about slicers?
Can you show that
Okay.
again?
So the last, oh, did somebody have a question? I heard someone talk. Anyway, so the last thing I'm going to show you is if you needed to manipulate your data in some way, and then how you can refresh your pivot table to take in that changes. So say you needed to change the unit. So let's just say we need to change this, or we need to change some things here. So any changes that you make to your data, it won't automatically update your pivot table. What you have to do is refresh your data source. So when I refresh it, it'll pull in any changes to your data that you might have made, and it'll update your pivot table. So say you have a pivot table set up, and you just got some additional information that actually these items got returned, so you need to remove those from the sales. You can change it in your data source, and then just hit refresh in your pivot table.
Can you go ahead and do the slicer one more time?
Slicer, sure. Real quick, I'm just going to go back to the slicer. When you're on your Analyze tab for pivot tables, you're going to go to Insert Slicer, and then you could pick how you want to look at it. In this case, the most logical one is business. Another example would be is if you're looking at, I mean, I don't know what you guys all do, but sometimes if I'm looking at like my div and then I want to look at my line and then my subline, you can like filter by line and only look at the sublines under that line. Or if you want to look at specifics, maybe like northeastern stores, so you could click on just like the geographical, is that a thing? Yeah, right. So you want to only see the sales of the stores of the Northeast. So you could filter by geographical location and then, or add your slicer by geographical location. But so now that we have our slicer by business, we can, I only want to see footwear businesses. So those are all the divisions under footwear. So that's a slicer. Are we good there?
What does it do for you? It's the same thing as it's just a filter.
It's the same thing as like a filter. So my buyers specifically like it better because they can easily just like pick it out instead of having to like go through a filter. It just looks cool. I don't know. It does look cool.
It's
Yeah.
Also, it's also nice if you have a lot of things. There's a file that I have. It's my PO tracker, and it helps me plan receipts. And I have a lot of slicers there, so I can just quickly drill down to a specific spot without clicking on all these different arrows in the pivot table to filter on them. So I'll have dates when it's going to land, dates it was created, dates the PO was sent, the vendor, all these different things I have as slicers at the top of my spreadsheet. So I can it's just a lot quicker for me to click on them individually. So it's really more when you're using your data as a tool over and over again than, just presenting it as a report.
And then the last thing I'm going to go over, and I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but this happens to me all the time where I'll finish what I'm doing, I'll give it to my boss, and she'll be like, oh, wait, but can you add this? And then I'll be like, oh, yeah, of course. So sometimes you have to add data to your data source, and then but then you need to update your pivot table to include that as well. So I was going to do a whole long example of a VLOOKUP, but I don't think we're going to have time, So like say I wanted to add inventory units. So maybe she wanted me to add what our inventory was, right? That's a good thing to look at sometimes. So I'm just going to add some random numbers in here because I was going to like marry up a file, but I don't think we have time for that. But so say I added a whole nother column to my data source of inventory, and how I would have done that more technically would be to do like a VLOOKUP to an inventory file and pull in the inventory, and then but it would give us the same results, but these would be accurate numbers instead of just ones I had just made up. So now that we have our new data in our data source, and well, what if I want to include that in my pivot table? Well, instead of having to make a whole new pivot table in case I've already done all of this, I've formatted it, I have all my fields that I want. What you're going to do is you're going to go to Analyze in your pivot table. You're going to go to Change Data Source, and then you're going to go, it's going to give you this option again, and you can just simply add the new column in there. and hit OK. And now it's loading for a second. Oh, and my Excel's gonna explode, which happens to be all the time. I don't know about you guys. But anyway, you could just update the data and then it'll leave your pivot table how you want it, but now you have those new fields that you can pull in. And I guess that's kind of a good natural ending, and we have 10, 11 minutes for questions. If anybody has questions or if they want, one thing that we were hoping to get to is if you guys have any specific ways you wanted to look at your data, and we can show you those. So does anybody have any questions? This was just an Alex poll.
No, I mean,
Like just explaining. No, I don't think we do. We just have not your outline, right?
I just have this, my outline. Do you mean we can? I mean, sure. And like screenshots of what I did.
Oh, we also did record this, so.
Yeah, and you were doing it with me on your computer, right?
yeah, but sometimes we're really fast, so we're trying to figure out what to do.
Yeah, the hour is kind of a quick time. But I got through everything. I'm proud that I got through everything. Is there anything you want me to show again that I can show again?
You start at the beginning. Well, no, what I mean is like, when you first inserted the pivot table,
Yeah.
you just went and
Yeah.
took the data from that one sheet.
Yeah, so you have your data. You have to make sure they all have column headings,
Okay.
right? You're going to highlight it. However you choose to highlight it is up to you. I'm just going to highlight it with my mouse.
Okay.
So once it's all highlighted, you go to Insert, and then go to Tables, and then hit Pivot Table. And then this, if you have your data highlighted, this should just be hit OK. You don't have to do anything. Now you have a pivot table. Woo! So easy.
All right.
You could do so much with it. It's beautiful. I use pivot tables every day of my life. I don't teach them every day of my life, though, so sorry if that wasn't the best. It is recorded, so we can send it out, maybe. Except for that's embarrassing. All right, did anybody have a specific, thing you've been trying to do with your data that you wanted me to, show you how to do, maybe, if I
I'm
can?
going to show my file with the slicers.
Yeah, you use your beautiful. So Jim is way better at Excel than I am, and he does beautiful things with it. So we're going to let him show something. Oh, but do I just stop being the presenter?
Yeah, I'll do it.
Annette, I'm glad that you enjoyed it. It makes me really happy. If you have any ideas of what you would like us to go over, we can most likely go over it. So just send me an email, Kelly Hassing, and tell me what you want to learn next. Or we can just, we can come up with our own ideas, but it would be really much better if you told me what you wanted to learn. And if I can't, or Jim can't teach us, then we will find somebody who can. Sending us the presentation.
Now you have to
Oh, yeah. So, Christine, unfortunately, we don't have anything to send specifically. Oh, you're controlling my screen. Did you know that?
Oh, okay, never mind. I want to.
I'm just going to stop presenting. We don't have a presentation per se, but this will be recorded and we can send it. This was recorded, I think, and we can send it out. Or if you have any specific questions.
So everybody can see me.
Open this up. How about hear me? Can people hear me now? Can you mute your audio?
Yeah.
Because they might get some reverb thing. All right. Can we still hear me? We switched computer, so hopefully it works. Please say if you can't. So I have. All right. Here's a good example of this is what I was talking about. Let me get this smaller.
He puts mine to shame.
I mean, I developed this and it took a long time. So, but this is basically, I use this to forecast my receipts. I'm in inventory, so this is a PO tracker using Kmart data. Luckily for those people who are in Sears who unfortunately don't have the same amount of metrics that Kmart has. We have things like the appointment that the PO is going to land, when it's on lot, all those different things. So I use this to help plan my receipts. I have all of this data being pulled in, which includes what's on the PO, the cost of the PO, and all that stuff. And the pivot table is what I really use, because I have it grouped by what is going to land in dollars, and I have it by vendor. And all of these slicers I have at the top, they're just filters, but they're really easy and fast ways for me to change what I'm doing. So if I unfilter everything here, so I have to do this by division. This has 2 divisions on it, just to make it easier for me. So when I'm in iPlan and I'm doing one of my divisions, I would just click on one of them. So now I just selected division 18. I could do it by category group. I can do things like, I know that a particular vendor isn't shipping, so everything here is on the slicer you can see is highlighted. If I wanted to undo, let's say I'm going to control click on doc solution here, I've now removed them from the data set below. So I can make a lot of these adjustments up here in the slicers in order to manipulate the data in the table. So that would be a lot faster than if I was trying to, if I wanted to filter on the vendor, I can do that here by this drop down. These are the different vendors. But it's just a little more tedious to do when you're using this over and over again, because I use this as a tool and not as a presenting of a report. So that's where I find the benefit of using slicers.
So all of those are slicers.
Yeah, these are all slicers. Yeah, I just did a little bit more formatting on them than when Kelly did it. I added a color. Same thing as with the pivot table. They have themes here. I didn't do anything to. Whoops. Actually, I'm gonna click on a slicer.
She's going to be teaching the advanced pivot table class.
Yeah, here they have themes too for slicers, so you can very quickly. All you do is spend another minute or two, and your report looks a lot better just by using.
And
yeah.
It was super easy, and you pretend like you know.
And you just tell them that you're an expert.
Yeah.
And yeah.
It is super easy. This is not super easy. The one we did today was super easy. Okay, if you guys come up with any specific, you're sitting at your desk and you're like, I don't know how to do this, just come to me. I sit in C3, or email me, because I'm sometimes not at my desk. Very rarely though. And Jim, between Jim and I, or the rest of the EPN people, we can figure out an answer for you for sure.
All right. All right. Thanks everybody for coming.
We'll
send it out.